Hey YouTube, Ryan here. Okay, it's time for part two of my tiny house tour video. Today we're going to go over the exterior. First, I'm going to show you some construction shots and what the exterior looked like, because I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of ashamed of what it looks like right now. So I want you to see it first, like when I got done with it, it was gorgeous. But now, 5 years later, after being parked in Texas, the weather has not been kind. I haven't pressure washed it or sanded it, restained the cedar siding or anything like that. I'm gonna have to spend a good month once I get to Arizona on my All Mine Ranch, my off-grid homestead that I'm going to be building out and taking this tiny house to. I'm gonna have to spend about a month cleaning up the tiny house and just doing repairs and renovation. And so I've got a lot of videos coming up on that, sort of the taking a tiny house, moving it to another state, integrating it with an off-grid homestead and solar, power system planning for all of that type of thing. So a lot of great content to come. So make sure you subscribe. But let's first just get into it and look at some of the construction photos of what it looked like. And then I'll switch back to video and we'll take a look at what the tiny house looks now. And I'll just point out some of the features and some basics just to give you a better sense of this, the Lightbox, the structure that I built myself and have been living in for nearly 5 years. All right, let's go. Okay, this is what the trailer looked like when I picked it up. I paid $4,500 down in Florida because I happened to be in Florida, and I towed it all the way back to Boise, Idaho. And by the time I got there, you can see on the far right I had a bent trailer jack already right from the get-go. But that's all right. I replaced it and started adding some decking boards for the subfloor to bolt into. And there winter hit, and that's covering it up from rain. So actually, no, I guess spring hit, so covering it up from rain there. But there's the trailer inside my fence. I had to pull down a section of fence and bring it inside, but now we've got the subfloor on so that we are pretty much ready to begin framing. I put the fence back up for privacy. There's a pristine subfloor ready to start going vertical, and there is the very first wall. And I did have some help on the first day, but by and large, 99% of it I ended up doing myself, especially after the helpers, I started noticing some mistakes that I think would have been avoided had I done it myself. So this is where I switched gears and just started framing up and to the right, bit by bit, not raising entire sections of walls like most people would do. I did it stick by stick, 2x4 by 2x4, building up into the right as I could. And things are starting to come along there. You can see I have a second story with the framing, and pretty soon we're going to start putting on some sheathing and framing in some openings. That octagon is for the bathroom window, which you saw in the previous video with big windows above it. There's an interior view, and the blue is just a tarp I draped over the whole thing, again, to protect it from the elements, because Boise gets some pretty severe storms in the spring. There's a shot of the loft, the main loft, my sleeping loft. So it's starting to come along. More sheathing going on. There's the opening for the doorway, openings for windows, etc. So made good progress on it, but we're already into it a good 7 or 8 months at this point, pretty easily. So there's me looking a little younger, working on it. Finally got some roof decking on, moving this sheathing up on the roof all by myself up ladders and getting it in place. And then this is the overlayment on top of the roof decking. But then I started getting the windows in, started to get the Tyvek house wrap on. We're maybe 30% done at this point. You can see now I call it the Lightbox. Look at the ridiculous amount of windows. I was getting such good deals on windows. I was having a hard time saying no. And you can see with no window coverings on how much light comes into this tiny house. So I really like that, and this is why I named it the Lightbox. There's a transom window, I think you call it, that is not leaded glass. I don't know what you call that, but there it is installed, and I think it looks really good. That's one of my favorite features on the tiny house. But now we're into it about 1 year at this point because winter hit in Idaho. Things really slowed down, but that was okay because it allowed me to save up my money and buy more materials. You can see here I'm starting to frame in the windows. Look how pristine that Port Orford cedar is. That's a special kind of very aromatic cedar that's very blonde in color that I got a good deal on, that you can only find it in a certain part of the world. And I happen to get my hands on some of it in Boise, Idaho. So there's a view from across the street as I'm framing in the windows. And now we're getting into that Port Orford cedar on the corners, and I'm putting up some of the metal cladding. I did that, in select places. I was trying to go for a rustic industrial look, a mix of those two looks. And now cedar siding starts to go on. Making good progress here. Maybe at 60% completion at this point. Okay, there's the end view. It looks like that might be almost completely done on that end view, at least that particular side of it. There's one interior shot. You can see I got some carpet in and a ladder and a ceiling fan. Starting to look like an actual house interior. There's the back side with all the windows with the siding nearly done and stained. So that's looking pretty good. And there's sort of the media shot. There's the Lightbox image that I used when posting Facebook pictures and things like that. There's another shot in the shade. I think the house looks really good. And then more of what the exterior used to look like. Almost done at that point. I've got one more course of cedar siding to do up at the top row there. And then a few months later, it was time to hit the road. So that's what she looked like when I first built it and first got it on the road. That was about 2 years into that process right there. Okay, I wanted to show you a few still photos before we go back to live video of what the Lightbox looks like today. Because in the video, it's very bluish, and I had a tough time correcting the color. So I want you to get an accurate representation. So let's go back to some still photos so you can see what the cedar siding looks like now. This is my setting. I'm parked beside my landlord's house in his side yard, so it's shaded both by the house and that massive tree that is over top of it, and that's really caused a bit of a moisture problem. I've built a deck on the tiny house with 2 ramps going up to it so I can ride my motorcycle right up on the deck and then back off again. Here's the back side, and you can get a better sense of how the side that gets no sun at all is very dark versus that right side, which is a little bit more reddish because that gets the western sun. So there's some algae growing, lots of mold in general. Now back on the front, towards the right of the front door, I did try to pressure wash that area. That's why it looks a little bit whiter. But overall, the entire house is just darker overall. And that's just due to weather exposure. So here's the front view. You can see the ramps coming up to the deck. I keep this sun sail over it to give me shade. I've got a couple of deck chairs that I got from my father who died a number of years ago, so those have some sentimental value. I've got some solar panels sitting out on the deck, so disregard those. But here you can see how I'm right under a tree. I've got some propane tanks on the left, and there's a fence that we had to take down to back this into place. It's still sitting, it's up on jack stands, but the tires are still on the ground, although I haven't put air in the tires and they're kind of going flat. And the ground gets very wet, so it's kind of sunken down a little bit. And there I'm pointing out the line for my plumbing that goes right into a septic tank that the house sits right over top of. There's just a view in my kitchen window. The metal siding, there's where the water hose comes in, my hose connection there. You can see that side's always in the shade. I have a AC window unit up there now. That blue thing is my water hose that comes in. And this is the side that gets absolutely no direct sun exposure, except maybe a little bit when the leaves are gone in the winter. But this side has gotten very dark. There's a lot of growth. And as you know, trees sort of shed critters and bird poop, and they drip a lot of moisture even after the rain is gone. My tires are looking kind of sad there. They're a little bit deflated, but I'm about to replace those. You can see that hose comes in underneath with the water. And that white square, here I'm pointing out all of the algae and growth and just how dark it is in general. So that's all going to have to be pressure washed off and then sanded and then restained. But I'm going to do it, and it will look much better after I've been out in Arizona for a few months. There's where my power comes in, that black line, and I just shoved in a rag to keep water out. And that actually worked pretty well, but the rag is getting moldy. And there's an outside outlet that I've just pulled out recently. It's completely rusted out, even though I thought I had waterproofed it. So I get a lot of moisture on this wall. And that's just what it does to cedar siding. There's no real getting around that. That copper rod is actually my grounding rod for my electrical panel. And this is the side that has the bump out for my bathroom, and that's just a shot up. The round thing is the vent for my propane hot water heater, and there's the propane tanks, which are connected to a pipe that just runs right through that bathroom wall. And that fence is sort of dilapidated, so I've got some boards actually pressing against the house so that the house is keeping the fence from blowing around when we get high winds, which is actually very common here. You can see how the rain has caused, dirt and everything to splash up on the underside there. Overall, I love the spot I'm in. It's fantastic. I love the setting. I love the views. But being under that big tree and with so much dampness for so many months of the year, it's just really taken its toll on my tiny house. So I'm really looking forward to getting it out of here, getting it into a drier climate, and beginning the overhaul process of, like I said, pressure washing it, then sanding it all smooth, maybe putting some new stainless steel nails back in it here and there as needed, and then restaining the entire thing so it's got more of that reddish hue again. And I've also got to clean up all these window frames that have a lot of dirt and mold growing on them. I should have been better about maintenance, but I've just been extremely busy with my day job and all the projects I have going on. There's a storage rack. Up against a shed, so I put a lot of stuff in that rack and in the shed and in my carport. And that's one of the most difficult things for me about tiny house living is just not having a garage. And so I'm really looking forward to getting out to Arizona and building out my garage structure there. And those solar panels you can see on the deck there, they're going to be used in my solar array out in Arizona. But I had to bring some home to do a little bit of testing. There's just a wooden step that goes in and a lot of damage on that entry threshold there. In fact, my floor inside, that's the knocker, my floor on the inside of the front door is actually swollen and needs to be repaired a little bit as well because of the way rain comes through. So that's an area of focus I need to work on. Okay, going back to still images again, as you can see in the still images, it's not nearly as blue, but there's some detail of the extent of the moisture damage to the cedar. All things considered, I think the cedar's held up well. It just needs a good sanding. In this next, I've already got the new tires, so in this next week, those will be going on the trailer to get it roadworthy for Arizona. I've also have to do a little bit of work to some of the roof trim that on the forward-facing side that gets all the highway wind. Got to reinforce that a little bit. But the metal's held up really well. A little dirty. Could use maybe some acetone on it to clean it up. But I really like that feature, and it's held up pretty well. I have 2 window AC units, and when I get out to Arizona, both of those are coming out and will be replaced by a very efficient mini split system that I've already bought. And so I'm looking forward to getting a more efficient and better working and quieter air conditioning system. More photos of the back side and in the windows. I don't get to really enjoy the view as much as I would like to because there's traffic. There's a road on the back side, and there's traffic with headlights and everything. So I keep curtains closed on the back side. But when I get out to the desert, that won't be an issue. I'll be able to take down most of the curtains and most of the mini blinds, so I can enjoy the view more. Although I will have to do some things to keep out the heat. There's what the tiny house looks like from the roadside. So with that fence in front of it, it's really in the tree, it's really hidden quite well. You almost can't even tell that it's there. It just tucks in very nicely. And I've never had any issues with the local, city or county. No one's come knocking on the door saying, hey, you can't have a tiny house here. So that's been great, even after almost 4 years. In fact, when I moved to Arizona, it'll be almost 4 years to the day that I've been on this spot. In South Dallas. Just a few more detail shots. About once a year, I do trim back that tree. It lets in a little bit more light, which is good. And just to move the tiny house out of there and get it on the highway, I'm going to have to trim back some of those branches because they're physically blocking the egress. But I guess the darkening of the cedar does blend in well with the fence. It seems to match. That was not intentional, just sort of worked out that way. There's my kitchen window that's frosted, but you can see, a lot of the stuff on my interior shelves kind of through the window. That is the my desk window, which I keep closed most of the time so I can see my computer screens. And again, just more shots of the exterior on the back side so you can see the damage there. And there is the damage to the electrical outlet. So that's going to have to come completely out, and I'm going to have to rig up a better way because I do want exterior outlets, but they've got to be able to keep moisture out. And right now the rain comes down so heavily that that is a challenge. So I've got some work to do there. And that's just another image of the service entry with the copper grounding bar going down into the ground and the jack stands that support the house so that it doesn't move. Now in high winds, I still can feel it move just a little bit. It will rock when we get a storm, but overall not too bad. And that's just extra pipe, and the pipe on the right is actually my exterior water line that drains to the land. Okay, so that is the exterior tour of my tiny home, the Lightbox. I hope you enjoyed it. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I've got a lot going on. There are so many projects and sub-projects and tasks to do in order to take this tiny house out to Arizona. But the next thing is I'm going to publish part 3, which is an FAQ video. So if you're considering going tiny or want to build one or just take on a project this scale, my girlfriend asked me all the questions that were on her mind, and I answered them to the best of my ability. So again, make sure you're subscribed because I'm going to release that one in about 1 week from now. And then I'm going to be filming and documenting all of the steps that I am going to be going through to get this tiny house ready, to get it on the road. I've got to, get some of the weight out of it. So it means taking out possessions, taking down some cabinets, essentially start moving my stuff out to Arizona, swapping out my refrigerator to go from an old vintage, actually an antique 65-year-old refrigerator, to a brand new DC solar powered refrigerator and putting in a little system for that. And swapping out the wheels and the tires because they're 5-year-old China bombs, as they call them, for the tires. Today I just took down some cabinets here in the interior. I'm not going to show you that yet, but I will in a future video. So thanks for watching, but make sure you subscribe and like and leave questions so that I can answer them in the next videos. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next FAQ video. Bye-bye.